But let's unpack some of the other issues that the Minister talked about. Equal Education's General Secretary, Itumeleng Mothlabane, joins us now. And Itumeleng, you were listening to that briefing by the Higher Education Minister, Buti Manamela. And while he did acknowledge that there are some challenges in the sector, do you get a sense that it was a rosy picture being painted when really the situation on campuses are very different?
Yeah. Look, thank you, Michelle. I think I must give credit to the minister because he was able to acknowledge a few things, particularly the equity gap that exists currently in our institutions of higher learning, the digital divide. But I do think that the picture that is not exactly what we were seeing in our institutions of higher learning even now. I was interested in hearing how we address the NSFAS gaps that already exist without looking into the new applications that he was talking about mostly. The current education system is quite exclusionary, and particularly when you look at how students are funded. I was actually interested in the different crises that exist in the University of Johannesburg, in the University of Free State, where students that were already funded have been defunded in our institutions of higher learning. But also at the same time, when he speaks broadly about the application system, I wanted him to acknowledge the fact that in 2024, 70,000 students write their matric, and only 200,000 spaces in our institution of higher learning, and this includes TVET. And so I feel like the broad picture that he was saying is committed to needs much more practical implementation steps for us to be able to believe and hope that things will be remedied at the beginning of 2025.
Yeah, I kind of wish that you were in the room because there is a Q&A taking place at the moment. And these are some of the important questions we hope will be asked. And our team is keeping an eye on that briefing as it plays out. The Q&A session is now underway. But Itumeleng, the Minister also announced the launch of the 2026 NSFAS process. That's apparently going to be launched tomorrow. I mean, is there a new system that's being launched for applications every year? And are we at least, if that's the case, improving on the application system?
Look, I think for me, it was impressive that the system he's launching acknowledges the gap that already exists, because as Equal Education, we organize learners that are part of Quintile 1 to Quintile 3 schools. These are schools that hardly have internet access, and therefore it's quite important that there is a collaboration between the Department of Basic Education and the Department of Higher Education, particularly in assisting students in accessing NSFAS. One, I do feel like it's a launch of new different systems every year, but for as long as there is improvement, we will welcome that. But secondly, he frames this NSFAS issue as something that is a community issue, and therefore I still think that there is the space, because in the Department of Basic Education, in the way that they do pop-up stations, they go to communities, they engage these libraries. I don't think a press briefing is enough to gear people towards accepting these students as they come and knock on their doors for them to be able to do these applications. So, but another thing is that the extension of until the 15th of November, I do think it's quite important that at the beginning of 2026, there's considerations for students that wouldn't have been able to access the application before the 15th of November, because a lot of the times, and we've seen that it could be lack of planning from parents, but also there are a lot of mitigating issues that get students to not be able to apply on time and only want to apply at the beginning of each year. So as much as we welcome them extending to the 15th of November, but it's quite important that even at the beginning of each year, there is consideration for late applications.
So you think we need to, that's another question we need to ask the Higher Education Minister, if there can be an extension to the beginning of an academic year for applications as well. My executive producer is listening and is passing these questions on to our reporter who is at that press briefing. So the unemployment numbers in the country speak to Itumeleng, the fact that our young people don't have options, right? The minister said an interesting number, and I wonder what Equal Education's numbers are, but he says plus minus 1 million students each year have funding from the National Student Financial Aid Scheme. It's over just over 900,000, I think. How does that tally up with the numbers that you have?
So as equal education, we don't have extensive research, particularly on higher education. So I won't be able to give you confident numbers, but what I can give you is lived experiences of the students that we organize. We have a branch in the University of Western Cape where students spent almost a month at the beginning of this very year because they weren't able to access accommodation and they were also not able to access the registration because their NSFAS had not paid in the previous year. Currently, in the University of Free State, we have students that have been kicked out of accommodation because NSFAS has defunded them in the middle of the year. In the University of Johannesburg, we're facing the same thing where students have been defunded. So while that number seems promising, but it's quite important that we look at the demand for students. If the entrance into the system are 870,000, the matriculants that are writing are 870,000 alone. So therefore, that tells you that inside the institutions of higher learning, 1 million students is not enough for us to celebrate that as a rosy picture, because a lot of students are still left out of the institution, particularly the one in TVET colleges, because our TVET colleges, even the infrastructure and the resourcing has not been up to par in the way that the minister is saying he would like them to present as an option that's equal to the universities in our institution. And therefore, that's why I'm advocating for a more phased approach to access to funding, so that there can be lessons in the first phase that will be implemented in the second phase, third phase, and late applications, if that is if the plan is to remedy how NSFAS is currently working and assisting the new entrants into the system.
Yeah. How are you understanding this issue of being defunded almost way past the middle of the year? I mean, what are we expecting? On the one hand, what are we expecting these students to do? Because obviously, if they are owing in terms of their fees, they won't be able to register for the following academic year. But secondly, how does it happen that these students don't qualify and NSFAS only finds this out towards the end of an academic year?
It is quite perplexing, and it shows you how ineffective the systems are, because how does it happen that students are funded at the beginning of the year and only 7 months into the academic year they are told that actually your funding has been withdrawn? Then this becomes a big issue of dignity, because the students that are funded by NSFAS are Black poor students, and those students will not be able to afford to continue with their education system. We have institutions of higher learning that have already had students now leaving accommodations because they have not been able to pay. And also at the same time, they don't have food to eat. Now, as Equal Education, in 2020, we went to court for the Department of Basic Education to declare nutrition and food as part of the enablers of access to education. And that is the same even in institutions of higher learning. If students don't have provision, they will not be able to study and learn in the ways that they should. And therefore, we find it quite problematic that NSFAS would do this, particularly in the middle of the year. And I would have loved if the minister would have alluded to this, because it's a crisis, but also it's a crisis on a particular people that impacts the dignity of a particular kind of students. And therefore, it's the responsibility of the minister to respond with urgency in what we are seeing in institutions of higher learning right now.
It would be a real shame if these students are not able to not only complete the academic year, but enroll for the following year as well. Itumeleng, Mothlabane, let me thank you for your time.